All righty. Welcome everybody. We will give it another minute or so just so that we have people who are jumping between meetings or grabbing lunch can join. So stay tuned, but welcome. For those of you who are just joining us, we're giving it another minute or so people can join, but feel free to chat in where you're from. Any fun facts, we'll get going in a few. Happy Thursday, everybody. Friday, Junior. Okay, we will kick it off. We'll let people roll in. I know it's that lunch hour and everyone is bopping between meetings and Zoom calls, but hello, welcome. My name is Kelsey DuPont. I am with Daxco. I'm so excited that all of you have joined us for our engagement strategy session, focusing on fundraising through our marketing strategies and tactics. Before we jump in, just a few bits of housekeeping. All of the participants have been muted to cut down on background noise, but that being said, this is supposed to be very collaborative, so chat in any questions you have or thoughts along the way. We definitely want to hear from you. And with that, we will jump in. So you're trying to promote your mission, re-engage with past donors, and increase giving this year. As revenue sources continue to recover across the movement, you deserve an opportunity to collaborate with your peers on what everyone is doing and best practices to really drive donations. That is why you are here today. It shouldn't feel totally impossible to have a successful giving season, especially even as the pandemic is still lingering and we're in this in-between mode of waiting for the vaccines and doors really opening. So today and in this month's engagement strategy webinar, we are going to focus on how you can combine your digital and outbound strategy to produce the ultimate mission-driven marketing plan to drive donations this year. Today, I am very lucky to be joined by two wonderful Daxco colleagues of mine. First, Daxco's product consultant, Erica Roberts. You'll see us in our screen over here. She has developed marketing strategies and worked on the fundraising committee for two nonprofits in the Birmingham area, Shelby Emergency Assistance and Share the Love with Children's of Alabama. Thank you, Erica, for joining us today. We are very lucky to have you. And then we're also joined by a familiar face, Daxco's Director of Marketing, Christy Brown, who will help lead the conversation as well and really drive what tactics to use, how to nail our messaging. And then following this webinar, we will send out a recording of this. We'll have a blog post too with some takeaways. So keep an eye out for some resources. But without further ado, we will get started. Christy, I am going to kick it over to you first. Many on this call realize the impact that donations can have, obviously, as everyone is recovering from the pandemic. Before we dive into the marketing strategy and tactics that you have great advice on, can you set the stage with some trends that you're seeing across the movement in terms of donations?
For sure. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited you guys are joining us. If you have been following along with webinars from Daxco in the last year or so, you will know that we are all about leading with the data first. So hopefully you guys have joined some of our Insights and Impact review webinars that we do every couple of months and the reports that we publish. One area that I wanted to focus in on and pull from in the report is total pledges. When we look at the year-over-year comparison, so the 2019 line in blue, it usually trends very similar, though it's decreased in 2020. So the main takeaway here is there was this jump in June, which I think a lot of that was due to the stay with us messaging that Wise were doing across the nation. JCCs were also doing similar campaigns. But the biggest takeaway I want to show here is in November and December. It's a similar trend line, but it is higher than 2019, which I think it can feel like, just given the rest of the revenue hurt, that this isn't an area of growth, when in reality, it was a huge area of giving towards the end of the 2020 year. So if you'll go to the next slide, I wanted to compare the January for the last 3 years, because January is the best one for us to look at, because in 2020, it wasn't really impacted by the pandemic. But there was a 46.6% increase in donations from 2020 to 2021 in January. So we can take that assumption that that is coming because of all of the work that our nonprofits did in the pandemic year. You've proved out your value in ways that you've always done, but maybe the community saw you in a new light for the first time. I mean, you were really able to give this holistic picture of the impact that you make. And so I'm excited to show those trends. I think they will continue to increase. If you are a YMCA and you'll be attending NATO in a couple of weeks, I encourage you to join my session with Constance, because we're actually going to dig in pretty deep on the breakouts by revenue size when it comes to pledges in 2020 and then into the new year. But this is a high level look of the impact that donations are having on revenue recovery.
Thanks, Chrissy. You mentioned kind of my next segue. Obviously, for the Ys that are tuning in, NATO is approaching. And of course, you can't make a marketing strategy without knowing the full context of what is happening in the world and in the market. So for everybody who is tuning in, what should our marketers, or those who aren't necessarily in a marketing role but are tasked with marketing roles in their teams, be thinking through to really drive donations alongside the fundraising team this year?
For sure. So I think the the biggest thing to really reckon with is that everyone is a donor. I think that when we have, from my conversations with a lot of Ys and Js in the past, the first thing that they tried to do is approach repeat donors. They're like, repeat donors are the way to go. We need to reach out to our past donors in order to drive new donations. And we've seen that only about 6% of your customer base is ever going to donate any given year. And of those 6%, only half of them, so only 3% of your total member base, is going to be a repeat donor. And this year, we got to change that. We got to expand our thinking beyond just having repeat donors or our repeat corporate donors, and allow everyone in the community that you're impacting to be considered a donor, which can seem daunting. You might have a really solid strategy in place to just repeat and send out some messaging to drive donations, but making sure that you are considering anyone you come into contact with or impact in your community as a potential donor expands your strategy tenfold. So if you go to the next slide, one thing that we want to talk through is the donor journey. And if you joined us last month, this looks exactly the same as the buyer's journey because, in fact, it's the same process that they go through. When you are reaching out to someone to buy a membership or to participate in a program, that is in that decision phase. And so when we talked last month, we talked that not everyone is in that decision phase. You need to make sure you're warming them in the awareness, in the consideration, and moving them down the funnel. The same is for donations. You can't just say, hey, donate today. Hey, here's a little message of all the ways that we impacted your community, donate today. Because a lot of them are not in the decision phase. They need to be warmed and moved through the funnel. And every single different audience will also need to be moved through the funnel. And that can feel daunting if you are just trying to quickly whip up an email and get it out. But we're going to talk through some steps to think through when we are building out the communication within each of these stages. Right here, if you look at this example, and this is like a high level view, I pulled from the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati because I loved their Stay With Us videos. It was something that I always followed along with at the start of the pandemic, but this is a great example of a content piece that would be in the awareness stage. It's organic type of messaging. It's a video that they produced and self-published, but there's also an element of that they could repurpose this content for ads and really engaging someone in like an online social setting that didn't know that a YMCA was making an impact. A lot of their messaging was around the seniors that they served during the pandemic when it was shut down, and the engagement that they did, because a lot of the seniors weren't necessarily on Zoom at the start of the pandemic, or they couldn't go get groceries. And Cincinnati is an example, but all of y'all did a great job of producing content that really engaged people in the awareness stage. And if you have a solid piece of content like a video or a blog post, you can let it translate across all of these different channels we're going to talk through. So in the awareness stage, that's organic, but you can also do awareness that is paid as well, and just reaching new community members with your messaging. The consideration phase we have here is an email as an example, reaching out. Thank you for staying with us. And then the decision phase, which provides more context into what you guys are doing in the ways that you served your community. And the decision stage is where you are really being consistent and following up and converting those who are potentially donors. This year, I would say, is like you all are always doing this. I know I'm like preaching to the choir, but this past year, you have like a full bucket of potential content you could create of all the ways you served your community. And I think like that just sets you up to create content that translates through the whole buyer's journey for donations specifically.
Thanks, Christy. I know we did a quick overview here. Again, if you do want to have a refresh of the full buyer's journey from last month, we do have that online for our resources. So definitely tap into that. Christy, you spoke about different stages and ways through examples, but wondering if you could also tap into thinking about messaging. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, there's new donors, there's old donors, there's people we don't even know who might be donors. Could you talk us through some, just like shed some light on different aspects in terms of messaging for these folks?
For sure. So nailing your messaging. I think some people just want to immediately get to the messaging portion of creating content or a campaign for marketing. And especially when a lot of the Y and J content you've produced is mission driven, it can be like, oh, this is something I can just go pull from. We are for, in the Y example, youth development, social responsibility, healthy living. Like we can easily pull from that messaging. And that's good. That's good supporting messaging. But I would say the ones that convert really are thoughtful and take the time to answer these two questions before anything else is built out, written, produced, published. One, who are you targeting? And this has probably been a message you've heard from Daxco for years, making sure you have a really targeted audience, but identifying who your audience is. And then the second one, outlining what they're trying to accomplish. So if we go to the next slide here, under who are you targeting? This could expand tenfold, but I tried to narrow it down a little bit in that there are individual contributors that you're trying to donate, and then there's businesses, so corporate donors, past corporate donors, new corporate donors. A lot of times, some of the messaging I've seen before I was on the marketing team at Daxco and worked on the engagement solutions team, was they would just try and do a blanket statement to all members about donations. And I get from a timing perspective that can help save your time, but the messaging could sometimes miss the mark when a lot of your members want to contribute. So if we're saying, okay, who are we targeting? And in this example, we say members who've never donated. I would say drill down even more into members who have never donated and are on a family membership type. And you can say one thing they're trying to accomplish is making sure their children have safe places to engage with the community, even in a pandemic world. That's the messaging you would want to land to that audience. versus members who've never donated on a senior membership type. They want to pull from that Cincinnati messaging around the groceries that were delivered and the senior engagement and phone calls and proving out the different ways that you serve people and what's important to them. It doesn't mean you can't produce and have supplemental information, but the real messaging that you want to nail down needs to really cater to the different audiences that you're targeting. So past donors, all the different membership types, members who've never donated, all the different membership types, community members. So you can really capture people in that awareness stage. And then businesses. I know corporate donors are a huge portion of the way that you guys get your funding, and really speaking to the corporate and social responsibility that they're trying to drive in the communities in which you serve, because you guys were essential in the last year, and you can really speak to some potential new corporate donors as well.
Well, with that, thank you, Christy. I'm actually going to hand it over to Erica now. Erica, could you walk us through some tactics that folks on this call, Ys and Js, can utilize and make sure that with these points that Christy brought up, that the message really is being reached to the right audience, and any tidbits and fun facts that you can share to help us with this process?
Yeah, of course. So thank y'all for having me today. I'm happy to be here. We're going to hang out on this slide for a little bit, and we're going to break down the aspect of that donor journey today so that we can make a strategy on how you want to move forward with your fundraising. So in that awareness stage, we're going to talk about taking a multi-channel approach to create a buzz around your fundraising efforts, optimizing your website to make that donor experience easier, as well as incorporating social media best practices. We'll move into that consideration phase where we'll talk about the importance of content marketing and what that means to your audience. We're going to dive into good email marketing strategies when creating strong call to actions. And then lastly, we're going to talk through some strategies around creating automated email campaigns, as well as utilizing artificial intelligence to aid in nurturing your potential donors. So first, let's talk about your website. So being able to optimize your site to create an easy, cohesive donor experience is a crucial step when increasing donations. So be sure to have an easily identifiable donate button or a page to ensure your website is up to date. Also, making your website mobile responsive will create that cohesiveness and ease when making those donations as well. So one important thing to remember is that over 60% of users arrive to websites via a mobile device. So you want to ensure that making donations are as easy as a few clicks of a button. Make those donation forms easy to fill out as well. Set an option for recurring donations if possible, and include multiple giving levels, and try to use branding and imagery if possible. That will help aid in creating a more engaging user experience. Along with that, with social media, just be sure to set aside 15 minutes a day to update your social media platforms with strategic content around your fundraising efforts. You'll want to engage with followers by responding to comments and keeping up with answers to any questions that come up. And adding a distinct donate now button is going to be able to give that social media presence and make that a breeze that will lead your followers directly from your donate page onto your website. Another best practice with that is participating in those peer-to-peer campaigns focused on your organization's success stories. That's a great strategy to engage those followers too. You just want to ensure that you're creating that consistency between social media, your website, and then of course, any emails that you're sending out. Moving on to emails, about a third of online gifts are made as a result of email marketing. So utilizing emails in your multi-channel approach is going to ensure that you're creating a more personalized approach to your fundraising efforts. Be direct within your emails. You've used social media and website platforms to share your stories. So reference those messages and create a strong call to action for donations via email. Be sure to keep it short, between 150 to 250 characters. That will address your calls and keep your audience interested all the way up to the ask. You want to make sure that you're engaging with your audience before your ask. So this is where those catchy subject lines and targeted communication come into play. Knowing your audience beforehand and segmenting them out by demographics will ensure that the compelling messages that you're sending is impacting the right audience. And then finally, follow up to let your donors know that they're appreciated. So we're going to take a deeper look into email strategy today, since that's what I specialize in. I'll be giving examples utilizing Dax to Engage, but some of these strategies can be utilized on most email platforms. All right, Kelsey, if you can go to that next slide too. That first task is going to be establishing your audience. So when beginning your fundraising efforts in email marketing, you want to first designate who you're going to be speaking to. Your audience wants to donate in areas that have the most impact on what matters to them. Your corporate sponsorship outreach will be different from your community outreach, and your prospective donors will need different types of engagement from your past donors. Beginning your strategy by identifying those target audiences will help you ensure that the content that you're including will be effective. Here, you'll be able to see an example of some group rules that we're able to utilize in Dax Go Engage that takes this information regarding membership types and campaigns in order to filter those specific audiences. So utilizing the donor indicator in Dax Go Engage allows you to filter those members that have the highest potential to donate. And if you're tracking donations in Dax Go Operations, you can exclude those past donors, so you're talking only to those members who have not taken that action yet. Being able to distinguish your past donors in order to offer recognition around past giving efforts is just as important as reaching out to potential donors. These donors have the highest chance of donating again, so new campaign rules are able to filter those past donors in order to create intentional communication around those that are most loyal to your cause. Next, we're going to be talking about compelling call to actions. So making sure that your email copy is direct and brief is one thing, but the next step is ensuring that you have a call to action that stands out. You want your audience to know exactly the action that you want them to take, and you want to give your members a clear path towards making that conversion. In addition, including a transitional call to action in your outreach is going to offer your audience a less risky path to making a donation. And then it also gives you the opportunity to deepen that relationship first. So those transitional call to actions can send them to your website, where you have included an educational video or membership story on the impact of how your organization has in your community, and then hopefully sway that potential donor to make a contribution. Next is consistency. So once you have your audience established and your email created with your strong call to actions, you want to ensure your workflow is tied to that particular campaign is consistent. So creating multiple email touch points through multi-step marketing campaigns, we're going to ensure just that. Here's an example of multiple outreaches via email that will continue to engage your audience throughout the decision-making phase. Remember, not everyone was going to engage in that first fundraising effort that they've been exposed to. According to recent data from nonprofitsource.com, it can take up to 8 touch points before a conversion is made. So this is why it's so crucial to have that consistency from your website to social media and your email marketing attempts in order to work together and increase this awareness and touch points for your audience. Utilizing Dax Go Engage's automation capabilities is going to allow you to create a campaign that your targeted audience will engage with and complete depending on that criteria set.
I'm going to jump in here. I think this is a super important point that, I mean, you brought up that it's 8 touch points. I thought it was 7. And the amount of time and consistency, like you mentioned, and again, with that creativity to reach the right audience, I just think is so important to really consider. And I do know Dax Go Engage does help with that. Are there any tips, Erica, you might have for people tuning in who might not have Dax Go Engage and they're thinking to themselves, oh my goodness, 8 touch points, that's a lot. Any, and I guess too for you, Christy, any tips for people tuning in?
Yeah, of course. So just to wrap up with those touch points too, it doesn't necessarily have to be all email touch points, right? We don't feel like we have to create an entire email campaign that's filled with 8 emails, right? We're talking from that very beginning of that buyer's journey and building up that awareness on those platforms that reach out to your entire community, so that they're aware of what's coming up. And then you can kind of create those special personalized touch points via email whenever you're getting to that consideration phase.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. When we say touch points, perfect point, Erica. Like an email is a great hands-off way to engage with your community. The reality is that, and we list it here as task tracking, is sometimes a phone call is the one that's going to convert, and sometimes a personalized email, not a marketing email, is the one that converts. And you said marketing automation here. And some of you may have heard of us talk about this in the past, but if you have some sort of AI tool, and I know that like AI sounds scary, but that helps actually scale and make the ones that are more likely to convert, the personalized email type outreaches are more likely to convert, so that if someone says, hey, I'm interested in donating, hopefully you're providing them with something that they can just donate directly. But if they want to talk to someone before they donate, then your team's really only reaching out to those people who are the hot leads, who are hot potential donors, and that helps scale tremendously. But again, I would say each tactic we talk about, to help us explain it, we bucket it in the 3 phases. But I would say sometimes social media could be the outreach that converts and drives the donation in the decision phase, even though we've kind of bucketed that more in awareness. So each person along the spectrum can convert, but it does take more than one email typically to see that those donations drive.
Thanks, guys. And I know, Chrissy, you kind of brought it up, the scary word AI, for folks to use. Erica, I'll hand it back over to you, because I know you mentioned earlier that everybody should really focus on technology to engage with past donors. And so with that, let me move to the next slide.
Yeah, of course. So taking advantage of that technology, and thank you, Christy, for bringing up that AI too. I mean, being able to use that artificial intelligence even after the campaign is over, your email marketing campaign, and taking all of those contacts or those leads that you have left over that didn't make that conversion, and then passing them over to an artificial intelligent assistant in order to nurture those prospects or those leads there. We'll be able to pull out those ones that are most interested in making that contribution. Sometimes we need a little bit more encouragement, right? Sometimes we need that hand holding in order to make that donation. And so that AI assistant is going to be able to help with that as well. But definitely taking advantage of that technology, just something as simple as having those automated messages that include maybe an email format that makes it look like an audience or your particular targeted audience is receiving an email from, say, the CEO personally, that's kind of directed towards that giving there too, can make a huge impact there as well. I know that the Anaheim YMCA likes to use that particular format when they're creating their automated marketing campaigns too. And it's nice to kind of receive a personalized message there too. But you're actually able to accomplish that within most of those automated email providers, as well as DaxGo Engage.
All right. Chrissy, do you have anything to add to this as well?
I actually have something to contribute that's not related to this, but it is related to donations. I wanted us to talk through, and I'm just seeing some Q&As pop up of, okay, we're talking through a lot of different tactics, but what are ways that we can like prove out the impact of each of the different tactics? A lot of times with things like social media ads, you can see clicks and tracks. One thing specifically with email outreach, Erica, you're more of an expert in this than I am, but those that do have DaxGo Engage can actually prove out the revenue driving from emails, correct?
Yes, so definitely taking advantage of those reportings that DAXCO Operations has to offer around Engage. You'll be able to track those donations there coming from those initiatives that you're sending out also.
And the note there, you do have to be using DAX Cooperation Fundraising in order to see that turnaround. So if you are using a different system, which some people are, depending on your association or agency, but if you do use DAX Cooperations, you can actually prove out the impact that your marketing team is making.
I think with that, we're going to open it up to some questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so everybody can see our faces, but definitely chat in your questions that you have. We have plenty of time. We are here to speak through any marketing tactics or anything from audience to messaging to our tools and tactics. Like, we are here and want to hear from you.
Erica, you work with a bunch of customers in your role that use DAX to engage. Do you have any examples of people who do some really great marketing strategies around donations?
Yeah, of course. Actually, the initiative templates that are built out in DAXCO Engage come from great customer examples. So we get a lot of examples coming from great initiatives that are sent. We see a lot of great initiatives sent in DAXCO Engage. And then we build out campaigns around that and include that in those initiative templates. So if you do have DAXCO Engage, I definitely encourage you to go in and check out those initiative templates that are built out. Some of the examples that we had today are some of the campaigns that we're talking about in initiative templates. So definitely check that out. Those are going to be the best leads whenever you're talking towards, giving efforts, and especially around, membership and childcare too. If you have any ideas around that, check out initiative templates first.
And just in case someone hasn't seen or used it before, do you mind pulling it up and showing where to find initiative templates?
Yeah, of course. You able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So we're just going to go right over here into DAXCO Engage. This is the home screen that we're able to provide here. We're going to go up to the tab, and initiative templates are going to be located right here. If you'll go in, we'll see all different kinds of categories here. We're going to go into that giving category also to see any type of templates around fundraising here. We have some COVID donation thank yous. We've got some annual campaign information. This was one of the examples that we gave earlier. Of course, this is when it's talking about those transitional call to actions too. That's going to link to. This is a great example of those different types of brackets when it comes to giving as well. Christy was talking about reaching out everyone as a donor, right? Being able to have different types of brackets for your donors to choose from, and then even setting those brackets to be, or those donations to be, a repetitive donation over time. I think NPR does it best, right? Whenever you sign up to do $10 a month kind of thing, you end up donating $120 for the year. But just something simple as that can kind of increase those donations over time too.
Yeah, I think the transitional CTA is a huge component of a mission-driven marketing strategy, because when you are reaching out to people who are donors, or past donors, they're more likely to easily click on the donate now because they get it. They get what their money's going towards. But for someone who is newer to the idea that, okay, the place where I go to work out, or the place where I go to take my kids for childcare, is actually impacting all of these other families in my area and needs, they aren't necessarily to the point of the awareness stage. They're not ready to convert and donate. But if you're serving up content that are more transitional, it warms them along the path. That can be a way to sort of scale your outreach, to make sure that, just because you didn't have someone convert on this email, you may have moved them into the consideration phase because they've then read or watched some sort of content that makes them more engaged with the idea of giving to you on that next outreach.
That's a great point to make, Christy. And just to add on to that too, donor stewardship matters, whether it be a small gesture, just like a thank you email that sends out automatically the day after a donation's made, or just a handwritten note from a team member. It's just important that that low cost effort is going to be able to have that high impact on your donors. So just to be sure to create an organization-wide expectations for following up with your donors, whether they be one time or reoccurring, is so important. One of the things that I did want to point out in initiative templates is that it's not just all about emails. We also have task related initiatives as well. And this one is around a donor thank you note too. So if you wanted to implement that, it actually creates a task for a team member to write a thank you note to your donors.
That's a really great point. It's really pushing them back into the awareness space, because anytime you get a new donor or even the past donors, you want to make sure you're engaging them. That's a great point.
I think too, something to think about, we heard it from Kinnick last month, but this year, yes, we're focused on this year, but what we do this year will impact next year, because we are in this transitional period. So your outreach and efforts now will set you up for success next year too. So it's not just this immediate cause and effect. It is really establishing those relationships and reaching out to your community in that realm too.
Yeah, and if you all had the opportunity, hopefully you did, to join our Accelerate session that was in Q1, or we're still in Q1, it was in February. We had some leaders from the movement come on and talk through ways that they're reinventing and accelerating into the new year, given the hard year. And there were some really great takeaways on some new partnerships that they had in their community that actually resulted in higher donations. So encourage you to take a look at that webinar as well. Really insightful thoughts from leaders in the movement that are kind of reinventing what donations mean and what being a donor means to their community.
Do we have any other questions? I definitely want to make sure we answer all of those. Feel free to chat them in. Again, it can be about anything with fundraising and marketing right now.
I see one question, Erica. You had mentioned the donor indicator. What is that?
Yeah, of course. Let me share my screen again and we'll go over that. That donor indicator is an opportunity to be able to identify those who are most likely to donate within your DAXCO operations data. It works off of an algorithm that's similar to your DAXCO retention indicator that gives you your little flags and lets you know who has the highest rate of retention over 90 days as well. So you'll actually be able to find that donor indicator in your group rules. So I'm just going to pop into those groups right quick and then show you where to actually find that donor indicator. We're just going to base one off of fundraising and then add that rule here. If you'll go down into those DAXCO indicators, I'm sure you guys are familiar with pulling out those members around that member retention, and then donor indicators right there too. So it's actually going to be pulling those that have a high or very high likelihood of donating. We like to use this donor indicator when we're building out those group rules around prospective donors. So people that have had a highly likelihood of donating, but have not yet taken that action. We can actually exclude those past donors and just pull those particular membership types. So there's your donor indicator rule.
That's awesome. Thank you, Erica. I think it's this messaging. I was like, as you were saying that, I was thinking through that, because typically we're like, not everyone wants to be a member, or not everyone wants to participate in childcare, but we're saying everyone is a donor, and that can seem daunting. So how do you actually approach that? Is things like these indicators can help you narrow in, because yes, you need to be considering ways in which you engage your full community as it pertains to mission-driven marketing. That should just be like part of your messaging. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have a targeted message, and that's one great way to do that.
It looks like we have a few more questions. One from Karen. When I open an initiative template, I don't see an email preview. What settings need to be updated to see this?
That may be based on a user permission. We'll have to check in on that, Karen. What particular initiative template are you looking at, if you don't mind following up? And we can take this offline too. I can send out a follow-up to where we can kind of look into that further.
And then we have a question from Kristen. Is it possible to pull a list with contact information for those that are on the very high and high donor indicator list?
Yeah, so you're actually able to pull that list within your groups. They are using that group rule. And then you can tack other group rules on top of that too, Kristen. So if you wanted to go in and just look at those family membership types that may have a high likelihood of donating, so that you're sending out your messaging around those particular youth impact mission driven fundraising efforts, then you can do that also.
And also, Kristen, like any group that you were to make in Dexco Engage can be exported. So if you were trying to then use a different tactic external to Dexco, whether that be like some sort of like social campaign or a call campaign, that list can be exported. The call campaign could also be a task campaign in Engage, but I would say like once you have that group, you can leverage that contact list however you need.
Awesome. Any other questions or advice from our panelists as we're in the giving season?
I'm gonna just make a plug. If you're going to NATO, come find me. Constance and I will be presenting, and then we'll have some fun things going on in our virtual booth. I know it's weird that it's going to be virtual. I wish that we were all going to be in person, but we are racking our brains for some fun ways to make things engaging, because I'm sure you're sick of hearing things that are engaging on Zoom, but we're going to make it fun. So come find us. And then also we'll be around at JCC ProCon later in April as well. So come find us. We are excited to engage with you virtually.
We do have one more question about Engage. How does Dexco define that a member is highly likely to give, or maybe not likely to give?
That is a great question, Maureen. That actually comes from an algorithm that our data scientists have conducted using a lot of the data that we've used it over the past 20 years of using Dexco operations. So it's just comprised of over 50 data points that pulls that information there for you using your membership information.
Thinking through that, a good example is like someone who's been around a lot longer is probably more likely to give than someone who joined like a couple of days ago. Not necessarily always the case, but it is just using the algorithm that feeds into it to put up some recommendations.
All righty. If you do have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us, marketing@dexco.com. Again, we will follow up with all of you with this recording so you can reference it throughout your strategy and planning. And again, we'll have a blog as well with this recording too. So stop by NATO if you are attending, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
See ya.